2 of Glass Onion on John Lennon, and this is A Toot and a Snore, Lennon McCartney Perspectives, Part 2 of 2. First of all, thank you very much for more messages of support related to the last show and to also my relative inactivity recently and my seeming inability to get back to anything like the rate of shows I was putting out before I reached the 50. I am gradually getting back in the groove, and there have been a few things going on recently, but plenty in the pipeline. I don't have any Nagra Reels updates because they've all been taken down. The channel that had them up there were a couple actually. One was called NG Beatle and one was called AdamBound. And AdamBound in particular, I would definitely recommend that channel in general. Some amazing stuff. He just posted a 2-part video with Magical Mystery Tour outtakes, many of which I hadn't seen before. And I think he is endeavouring to get the Nagra tapes back up again. But, it's a tricky old business with copyrights and all that kind of thing, which I'm sure we've talked about before. So this episode is part 2 with Sam Wiles. I'll refer you back to part 1 where I talked about Sam's show, but his podcast is called Paul or Nothing, and we recorded this back in June. I've edited it so there's not too many gaps. It's quite fast-paced, and we talk about various John and Paul related topics, their private lives, what was John Lennon really like and what is Paul McCartney really like, what kind of emotional resonance does their work have. Another YouTube channel I would like to recommend that I'm sure a few people have become aware of now is Breathless 345, and they did a remarkable series. I think just using clips that were available online, it's been called various names, but I think now it's called Understanding Lennon and McCartney. I'll probably put a link in the show notes, in fact. The person who runs that channel has also just done a 5-part documentary on Paul McCartney, and I'll link that as well. But yeah, great channel. Definitely recommend those documentaries. What else? We talk about Paul is dead and conspiracies versus the mainstream view of life. And then we do talk about Toot and a Snore, the bootleg. We get there eventually. As you'll hear me say, I don't really consider this any kind of official release. It's really just a run-through. So I certainly wouldn't judge John and Paul or Stevie Wonder by this. It's really just has that one piece of significance because it's Lennon and McCartney's only performance, if you want to call it that, together after the Beatles. We also speculate a little bit about a possible reunion. Again, this is ground that's been well covered on Glass Onion, and the nature of the Beatles' relationships and where the truth may lie. And since the truth is always elusive, then it's, I guess it's fertile ground for further discussion. I've also recently made a couple of guest appearances. I appeared on When There Was Fab, again, talking about John Lennon compilations. That may be a bonus episode on this podcast in the future, but I'll certainly post Ed Chen's version when that comes out on all the appropriate channels. And I also appeared on Fans on the Run with the wonderful Ethan Alexanian, and that was good fun as well. I think that's coming out sometime around the end of October, from what Ethan told me. I'll tell you more about upcoming Glass Onion shows in the outro, but for now I'm going to let you get on with listening, and I'll be back with a few words on the other side. Enjoy.
So you mentioned that book was the one that gave Lennon one of the worst representations. I've been going through one of Jeffrey Giuliano's books that he sent me a copy of recently about John Lennon, and the first few pages are almost solely dedicated to John's supposed history of bisexuality. And I was talking to my friend about this. Why, I don't want to say we and include you in this because you might not be included in this, but why are so many people vehemently interested in John's sexuality specifically? Is it because of the macho image he puts out? Is it because we feel like we've been lied to about the myth of John and Yoko, the sexual couple? Where does this fascination come from?
Yeah, I got to tell you, I do sometimes question myself when I'm doing this. I had a guy called Robert Rosen on the show. He started transcribing John Lennon's diaries from 75 to 80. It's a very complicated story involving Fred Seaman as well. But basically the diaries were stolen and Robert had to reproduce it from memory. But he said he had a pretty good memory of what was in there. And these diaries, there's some very weird stuff. Like John Lennon would write down all these erotic dreams he had. And he'd write down his masturbatory habits.
We've never known more of one celebrity's masturbatory habits than John Lennon, I think.
It is very strange. I mean, I'm actually someone who's not really interested in celebrities at all, and just find the whole fame thing absurd. It's a very good series actually called Clive James, Fame in the 20th Century. And it presents a parallel 20th century which is all related to fame. And it really just dismantles how ridiculous the whole thing is. But with John Lennon, he's almost the only person. John Lennon and Marlon Brando as well. I seem to be interested in the intimate details of their lives. I can't quite reconcile it, to be honest. I don't know why I'm interested in what he wrote in his diary, because I've never met him. And I'm always saying to other people, celebrities are just normal people. I think the thing is that John Lennon and Marlon Brando were fairly abnormal people. I think that's what it comes down to. So there is interest there because you're not going to just find the same things that everyone else does.
A lot of it as well, people react very strongly to a situation where it has the lady doth protest too much, methinks, whenever that happens. And like, since John rather famously did like assault people for like implying he was gay and stuff, that to me, in the kind of vein of the modern American right-wing politician who denounces homosexuality and then 2 months later he's caught in a bathroom or something, it just feels like that kind of thing, I
would be surprised if he, like Mick Jagger, had probably experimented.
If it had been Paul, who is constantly feminized in the media and the way people write about him, there would not be this furore. Or George, the spiritual one, the open one. But since John is meant to be this macho 50s greaser, which we all know just isn't true, apparently by all accounts he was a real delightful softie and really charming to be around and stuff.
I think it was just all those things. That's the fascination, probably. He's all those things you just said at the same time. No, I just think John Lennon had, not in a technical way, but multiple personalities. It's not multiple personalities, multiple facets. Mm-hmm. And those kind of people are fascinating for better or worse,
When you hear like psychologists going back and they look at the psychology of Jesus or something, people are so going to be doing that about the Beatles in 2,000 years' time.
Yeah, probably. So let me ask you then, can I turn it back on you? What kind of person is Paul? Is he fairly normal? He's obviously more artistic than he's given credit for. Give me your description of Paul, if you don't mind.
Oh, he's not normal. So, like, when people, like, describe the Joker as insane, they're like, no, that's incorrect. He's super sane. And I kind of feel like that's the same way with Paul. He's just on a different level of existence that is almost fruitless to kind of comprehend to our own lives. And I know that sounds like I'm putting him on this plinth, make him some sort of meta-human. And he's not, but he's awfully close, I'd like to think. There are so many times where you hear stories, like everyone seems to have a story bashing Paul about working with him and how he seems to be too controlling, this and that, blah, 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 or suddenly he can be really nasty, stories like shoving his cousin up against the wall and not attending his own dad's funeral to go do the Wings Over America tour, stuff like that. You do sometimes start to see a pattern of someone who is almost compulsively workaholic. And he's someone who finds happiness in work. He can definitely at least bury sadness in his work. I think we've seen that time and time again.
Do you think he's angry at all? Do you think there's any anger, maybe that losing his mother and losing Linda, perhaps? Because it doesn't sound convincing the song Angry that he did, that didn't sound convincing at all. But I wonder if there is some anger.
Possibly, but he wouldn't let it out. I think he's only ever let out a real anger in a song like Monkberry Moon Delight or something like that, where it's just him going absolutely insane. But then you cut forward to I've Had Enough, where it's like, you're talking to me in the back of my car and I just can't get anything right. And it's like, come on, Paul, this hasn't happened to you. Stop trying to relate to me as a normal human. You're not.
What was the one he did recently where he's on the piano? Is it From Egypt Station, is it? It's a sort of sad song.
What, I Don't Know?
I don't know, yeah.
Dogs at my window, dogs at my door. That one.
Did you find that convincing? And if you did, tell me I'm wrong. I want to be corrected.
So, silly love songs, they have worked for Paul since the start of his career. His acoustic numbers have always been highlights for me. Techno stuff, electro stuff always works with Paul. The ballads are what divide the fan community.
And do you get a lot of emotional resonance from them? I think that's what I'm interested in.
I find a lot of the emotional resonance for me is almost entirely different to what everyone else experiences, because I didn't grow up with Paul. I don't have all the baggage. I just take a lot of these songs as they come. And for me, I've really connected with songs like Frank Sinatra's Party and Back in Brazil and Dominoes, all the kind of weird ones that you could never put into a single or ever really put on a conventional pop album. But I like weird Professor Paul, doing McCartney 2. I like Hopelessly in Love, Paul, and those are things that really resonate with me when he's kind of being knowingly lame. I've always found that to be a really attractive quality in someone. If they know what they're doing is dorky, but they do it anyway, Paul is like that really good history teacher that you had at school that could make you care about the Bolshevik Revolution as if it was something that actually applied to your everyday life. He can make me really dig a granny tune or some Tin Pan Alley shtick. Whereas when John does it on Crippled Inside, even though that is one of my favourite John Lennon ones, I don't find it to be as authentic as when Paul's doing Honey Pie, you are me. You know what I mean?
Oh, I think this is interesting because this is, I think, where the two camps, where they lie, is in authenticity. I don't know, I put myself in the John camp just because I do a podcast about him and I find him more interesting. So I think authenticity, perhaps.
Oh, no, I don't care if Paul actually means anything he's saying half the time.
All right.
Yeah. Well, for example, there are some songs where... Okay, a song where I don't think is entirely genuine is Despite Repeated Warnings off Egypt Station. Yeah. And that's, if you want to go by what the media says, it's the global warming song. If you want to go by what everyone on the internet says, it's the Trump song. And it just felt so obligatory. Of course, Paul's going to have to do a song about this meme figure of hate. And it's like, this is not going to age as well as, say, any of the anti-Nixon songs or anything like that John wrote.
Although everybody hated them. But I know what you mean, yeah. And like People Want Peace sounds like... I mean, that sounds like a song Ringo wrote and gave to Paul.
I'm going to steal that.
So terrible.
I'm going to steal that for my Two Legs appearance.
Sorry if that's such a terrible thing to say.
No,
oh, it's just like, People Want Peace. I can enjoy that record sonically,
so
for sure.
When I bought Egypt Station, right, I got it on vinyl, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to be a good little boy. I'm going to listen to it on vinyl and not listen to it on Spotify for free, even though I have it right here in my hands now. And I got about 5 minutes into the bike ride home before I pulled over and got my phone out and put Egypt Station on. And when you put shuffle on, it doesn't tell you it, and you don't realise it until you're 2 songs in. So I put Station 1 on rather than just clicking play, and it was still on shuffle. So after Station 1, People Want Peace comes on. I'm like, oh, wow, this is really cool. Like, Paul's doing this, like, opening statement about, like, peace and stuff. And in this context, it's kind of, like, really anthemic almost. Like, Paul doesn't really do kind of stuff. And then when I realised it was, like, song 12, and I heard it in its actual proper context, I couldn't stand it. I thought, this is absolute tripe. But I'm totally stealing that. It sounds like a Ringo
Yeah,
song.
go for it. Go for it.
That's so funny. No, I love all of John's songs that he gave to Ringo, though. I love I'm the Greatest. Absolute banger of a tune that is. And I love that John said, I couldn't really get away with it. I'm like, no, you couldn't, John. You really couldn't have. But I totally get that you wrote it. Of course you did.
Yeah.
I was going to say, with my best friend, I see a bit of a Lennon McCartney relationship with me and him. He's my hero in terms of podcasting. Like, he's just so full of energy, and he's always got ideas, and he's always moving forward, and it's, go, 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 go. Whereas I see a bit of John in myself in that sometimes I can be really excited to do something. I can edit 3 episodes in a day.
Yeah.
And the next week I'm like, I don't want to do any of this. I don't want to do anything productive. And then things start spiraling out of control. I can notice, like, John being like, God, it is annoying having Paul just be so fucking brilliant all the time. And I can understand Paul being like, God, I just wish John would just fucking enjoy being in the Beatles for 10 minutes. And I really find it hard to choose either side at that crucial last moment, because if you're going to have any sense of human empathy in studying this, if you can't see both sides of the argument, then you're really not approaching it with the care that it warrants, in my opinion.
You're talking about really the steady worker versus the sudden bursts of energy and sudden whims. I'm the same. I'm totally the John Lennon type. When I get burst of energy and probably get obsessive about something when I'm really into it. Like yesterday, I spent I think it was just like a 5-hour stretch putting all the clips in my latest episode, recording the intro, recording the outro. Just took hours and hours, but I thought when I get in the flow of it, I just get such a rush of energy that better for me to stay up all night. I don't do that very often, or hardly ever, in fact, but occasionally stay up until the early hours doing it.
Are you more of an evening or a morning worker for your podcast?
It's funny. I can do both, actually. I think the afternoon is when I have a lull. The afternoon is when it's a good idea to do nothing.
Yeah.
Because I tend to start with a burst in the morning, get a bit tired in the afternoon, and then get a second wind in the evening. So morning and evening, I'd say.
Yeah. It's rarely ever light when I'm writing this podcast, if I'm honest. Sometimes I'll like sit bolt upright in the morning and be like, oh my God, I suddenly understand pipes of peace. I need to go downstairs.
Yeah, and having like sudden ideas as well. I do channel John Lennon quite a bit. You know, I don't pretend to be him, but you know, you can have that person in your head thinking, oh, John Lennon's just woken up with a sudden burst of energy. Oh shit, he's probably had an afternoon lull where he's burned himself out. You know, I can imagine myself as him having these bursts of energy rather than having a sustained thing. So you're saying Paul is maybe more of a steady worker, perhaps?
Not a steady worker. He's a psychopathic worker. He's beyond that. There's a great story. I can't remember what book it was from, but it was like Paul Simon's driving with Paul, and they've got the radio on. And no matter what radio station Paul Simon puts on, Paul can come up with a counter melody that fits and is note for note perfect, and he can just sing it over it, and he can do it no matter what he did. And then Dustin Hoffman's like, you can't write a song about Picasso, and then one of the best tracks off Band on the Run just magically materializes. You know, I'm not saying this work is all Paul's best, but you know, he does it. He creates product. He creates very expensive product, as we found out recently. At the time of recording, Paul's just unveiled the Flaming Pie box set's part of his archive re-release set. And the final price on the collector's edition, £520 UK. Yeah,
okay.
So this is during a pandemic, like a crisis when most people can't even like afford to eat. And in this country, we're getting what, £400 a month for furlough, something like that. It's like less than a month's wages from the government.
You're not going to buy that one then, no?
I don't think I'm ever going to buy an archive set or any of the Beatles vinyl re-releases. I'm so millennial that I will just wait until the majority of it is on Spotify for free, and then I will complain for years that the bonus disc still hasn't found its way onto YouTube. You know, like, it's been, 2 years now since that Wings box set came out? Just released the Wings Over Europe tour disc now. Come on.
I think I used to collect quite a bit, but I think I kind of quite like decluttering. Not the Beatles happen to clutter, but you know what I mean. I don't really accumulate much, to be honest.
I like the vinyl. I like buying classic vinyl from the original pressings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, you give me 20 quid and half an hour on eBay, and I'll probably buy 3 singles that I've already got because they might be in slightly better nick. But stuff like buying bootlegs that are £800 or buying the picture disc that's worth 250 quid, I find that quite garish and a little bit ugly in some spaces. Like, my theme tune for my show is Temporary Secretary, and I can't even buy it on vinyl because it's so damn expensive.
Tom's got an amazing collection. You'll probably see on if you do video with him. Yeah,
Tom, his collection just puts mine to shame, and he's got a copy of Pretty Little Head as well, which really annoys me because that's one that I've been desperate for. Now, before we move on to our actual topic of the day, I've got to talk about the stuff that I first heard you in that kind of context, which is conspiracies, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you've gone straight to my 3-part Paul is Dead little series that I did. Do you have any thoughts on the whole Paul is Dead thing? Is it just a hilarious side issue for you, or do you give it a little bit of credence?
Not really. I'd say I have one view about it. If it turned out to be true, I wouldn't be perhaps as surprised as some other people. But the actual clincher for me, I'll tell you what it is. You know the January 69 Get Back sessions?
Mm-hmm.
They had the tapes rolling pretty much all day, and we've got, I don't know how many hours, 400 hours of audio. I can't remember how much.
All that nagging stuff, yeah.
Yeah, and someone has actually put together all the conversations together. I tried to find it the other day. It was online a few months ago. Some kind person had done that, and I was going to try and plow through that one day, just the conversations without the music. And the thing is, there's constant reminiscences about the Liverpool days. So if it was, William Campbell or Shepherd, that would mean they'd have to have coached him, and that every time they opened their mouth, he would know what story they were going to come out with. And I mean, there's many other things. It's very, very interesting. I mean, the number of clues is just crazy. I mean, it's either, if it isn't true at all, then it's a great feat of creativity to come up with all those ideas, which is very interesting. One theory I do have is that if you look at early 67, there's an interview with Paul where he's kind of seems a bit stoned, and he's got talking about the counterculture. I don't know if you remember one. He's wearing like a light jacket, like a white jacket or something. And he suddenly looks very, very tall. And he does look a bit like a different person. But John as well, in the Sgt. Pepper sessions, if you look at a picture of him there and compare it to 6 months earlier, or summer 66, just looks like a totally different person because he's just totally fucked up on Well, we're told LSD, but my theory that I've come up with is that John and Paul lost so much weight in those early times that it's possible, through reading a book that Tom Hignari and I reviewed called Riding So High, that Robert Fraser was bringing speedballs, which is cocaine and heroin mixed, to the Sgt. Pepper sessions. And in the Riding So High book, they say some of the Beatles' entourage undoubtedly partook, but the Beatles didn't, or probably didn't, or something like that. But I have a theory that perhaps John and Paul were doing those speedballs, so, immediately loss of appetite, and they're going to look like almost like quite different people, because then if you look at them summer 67 when they went to Greece, or the All You Need Is Love thing, they suddenly look like themselves again. But there was a period about 6 months where John and Paul both looked like almost totally different people. I've got some side-by-side photos, actually, on my... I was just looking at the other day.
Couldn't a lot of that be as well, like, this all started during the period when they suddenly stopped being so public in the limelight as well? So normally... the difference between two Paul McCartney photos would be like Kim Kardashian today, like a couple of days at most between publicised photos. But now you got months and months and months. So it is going to appear all the more shocking when you do see a final difference.
Yeah, it was the Sgt. Pepper party in May. You suddenly had these pictures. The Beatles were there and everyone saw these pictures. I mean, obviously I wasn't there then, but my parents told me.
Is that the party that Linda took the famous like thumbs up photos at and stuff?
Right, yeah, and John just doesn't look like himself at all, just looks like this absolutely fucked up, wasted guy. But I think, let me think about this. The way they aged as well, because they had so much stimulation that they could suddenly look quite a bit older. I don't know if Billy Campbell is supposed to be older than Paul or not, but they can look like suddenly different people because they become so worldly as well. Plus, there's been a lot of trauma involved with being public figures like they were. So there's certain factors. But one of the things is that a lot of the Paul is Dead people, they'll say like how his face changed shape almost. But if you lose loads of weight and you suddenly lose all your puppy fat and you look very thin, you're suddenly going to see the jawline. It's going to appear a lot stronger. So I think there's reasons for a lot of that. I don't know.
I tell you what annoys me, though. I tell you what upsets me. It's when you come up with a reasonable counter-argument and then the counter to that counter jumps the shark entirely. So the big counter is, why would the secret cabal, Illuminati, guys in the suits upstairs folks allow more than one album to have the references on the front? Why would they continue to allow the references in the lyrics and all of that to be proliferated?
Yeah.
Well, Sam, it's because the hierarchy up top, they like these demonic rituals to be public to taunt us. And I'm like, no, that's a side effect of paranoid schizophrenia. I'm sorry, it's not the case. And it's theories to suit facts rather than facts to suit theories.
Yeah, I'd say the difference between our attitudes perhaps is, I'm not sure about it, that's not true. That's all I'm saying. If you take 9/11, for example, there's a good argument that says that if it was all a stitch-up, why did they say that it was Saudis that did the terrorism? Why not Iraqis? Then they could invade Iraq. And that's a good argument. I get you, there's loads of holes in lots of these things, but I think there's also a danger, and you seem very open-minded, so I'm not saying this about you, but I'm saying about the public in general, just rejecting conspiracy theories. The problem is that the public is missing a lot of pretty important information, and what I think is a very, very important thing is to realise that what you're being told on the news every day, it's not that it's all lies, but there's no possible way that news agencies could collate everything that you need to know and present it,
of course,
hour after hour, as if it's the only thing that you need to know about in the world. Because there's all these loads of other things.
Well, I mean, why should I have to go onto Reddit to find out that one of Theresa May's advisors has just been arrested for links to paedophilia? Why should I have to go online to find that out? I totally get that. And just here in England the other day, we've got all these Black Lives Matters protests going on, but the main headline of the day was Madeleine McCann suddenly out of nowhere as the classic distraction story. I mean, we can't use Diana as the classic distraction story now, so it's like Madeleine or Baby P, stuff like that. I'm surprised we haven't heard about Baby P during all of this, if I'm completely honest.
I think if anyone's interested in propaganda, really Noam Chomsky is the man. He knows about the media and things. I think the idea is that my stick on it, because I don't really spend any time on conspiracies anymore. I spent a few years on them, but I got so far down the rabbit hole and I was getting so sort of depressed. What I saw was probably the reality of the world that I had to sort of let it go a bit. But things like media, I mean, the fact that the media, all you really need to know is that the media is managed, so you have to be a bit wary that the things that your attention is being diverted to have been decided by an editorial team. It's like a magic trick, diversion of attention. So
And there isn't a kind of internal investigations or the kind of journalism police that's like an independently adjudicated force. All we've got really is like Private Eye. That's about it to kind of let us know what's going on in the world.
Even Private Eye, I mean, they're forever like exposing scandals, but then they'll get the tinfoil hat cartoons out when anyone says that there might be conspiracies, when in fact their newspaper is essentially telling you of small conspiracies every single edition. Like, politician conspired to not tell the public this, and he ended up getting a yacht out of it. Stuff like that. There's hundreds and hundreds of those. But they're small conspiracies as well. So I don't understand why suddenly they're anti-conspiracy when it's anything bigger.
Well, I mean, even in the Beatles story, you've got multiple smaller conspiracies. Lennon conspired with Yoko to get Alan Klein. A conspiracy just means some people aren't informed of something that other people are. How many managers and journalists would have been given 50 quid and told to shut up and let's not talk about the prostitute,
It's a game, really, but I think I still believe the public are far too innocent. I mean, if you look at what people are talking about, either in offices or on social media, it's essentially what the mainstream news has just told them, which is not, I'm not saying that it's not true, but I'm saying that that's not all there is to know. So I think of it a bit like a magic trick, diverting your attention over here while they put the card in your pocket over there, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, if only McCartney hadn't have, gone against the CIA and Operation Northwoods, maybe he'd still be here today, I think Mal Evans was the second gunman on the grassy knoll. I'm not sure. Okay.
My view on Paul is Dead contradicts my view on a lot of other possible conspiracies. So I'm with you on that one, 100%.
Hey, Paul is Dead could be a psyop, to discredit other conspiracies.
Yeah, it's a straw man. I mean, that there's beyond doubt that there are conspiracies which are given more information, more prominence, like Flat Earth and Bigfoot, to divert and to keep the public innocent of the fact that conspiracies, more or less, as I said, like conspiracies in corporate boardrooms, whether you want to call them conspiracies or secret meetings, that's the thing. A lot of it is language as well. And I'm a language teacher, so I know about the power of language. One man's administration is another man's regime.
Yes.
We bombed Gaddafi's compound, where you actually bombed his house, but compound makes it sound more scary and more like some evil guy from the other side of the world. So
Bin Laden was neutralized. Yeah.
All that
kind of thing.
Very, very interesting. Another thing is that the supposed date of Paul's death was November the 9th, but I saw that guy, Mark Devlin, I don't know if you ever come across him. Suddenly they've changed the 11 and the 9, and suddenly Paul died on September 11th. Hey, isn't that convenient?
Yeah, the other one is like, how it's like 28 if on the Abbey Road cover, and then it turns out he was either 26 or like 27, a year too young. Yeah. And then someone goes, no, it includes the 9 months in his mother's womb. I'm like, oh, you sneaky bastards. That's not what it is at all. But, it's all self-justification more than anything, because a lot of it as well, some of these people do actually believe that Paul McCartney was replaced by a clone.
Yes, but can I give you my counter? I'm totally with you on Paul is dead. But all those things that you've said, that they say conspiracy people fit the facts and don't want to believe in anything that goes against. If you flip that around, I find it disbelieving that there are people who read the news and believe that they're being told everything they need to know. I think that's just as lazy and just as misguided.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure we're on the same page to some extent, but I did want to make that point that most of the stuff that people say against conspiracies can easily be, if you called people mainstream theorists instead of conspiracy theorists, as the other extreme, if I gave them a kind of a pejorative title, like, naive mainstream believers, imagine if that was a phrase that was continually used. The world would be a different place. Could you imagine that? If someone said, yes, there was a terrorist attack. Conspiracy theorists have come up with this evidence, blah, blah, blah. Naive mainstream believers have rejected it and accepted the government's story. See, if you had a term to go the other way, then it would make them seem as ridiculous as I think they are.
What are your thoughts on the minor Beatle conspiracy about Mal Evans' death? Do you think he had a tell-all book that was really going to be coming out, or do you reckon it was just a case of suicide by cop, perhaps?
I think suicide by cop. I mean, if you don't mind me referencing one of my episodes, episode 35, it was about John Lennon's assassination, and with Gordo, from those conspiracy guys. To be honest, it's a bit too much to go into now, and I'm sure the title's going to put people off, and the fact that it's got conspiracy and the John Lennon assassination is going to put people off, and my numbers fell a little bit after 2 or 3 of those episodes, but the people that did listen, I think they got quite a bit out of it. So I would be more inclined with that one to believe that there might be something there. But even Gordo said, it's all speculative, lots of circumstantial, lots of whys more than hows kind of thing.
I was going to cover the Lenin assassination basically based on being inspired by those Conspiracy Guys episode, the original one that they did a few years ago. But I guess since I am a Paul McCartney podcast, first and foremost, it felt kind of a little in poor taste, like I was dipping my straw in someone else's milkshake, as it were.
Plenty of room for good podcasts.
However, it's left room open for me to do one on Klaatu and Everyday Chemistry.
Yeah, I don't really know those, to be honest. Everyday Chemistry.
Everyday Chemistry is the cool one. That's the Beatles album that supposedly came from another dimension.
Sorry, yeah.
A Mandela Effect one.
That. I'll tell you what, though, a 1970 Beatles album would have been just extraordinary if you'd somehow managed to get them to play on each other's songs.
The only part of that conversation that is annoying for me is that they would have written new songs that would not have been on those albums. They would have collaborated in some sense on something.
But they may not have written together, though. They might have just decided...
Junk is not getting on the album. They said no at the White Album. They said no at Let It Be. Junk's not getting on. I've seen so many Beatles 1970 albums, like side 2 opens with Junk.
No, but Every Night, and that would be something, and maybe I'm Amazed would have got on. That's 3.
Yeah. Again, though, it's like, would maybe I'm Amazed, would that have even been written if they hadn't have broken up? You're messing with the timeline here. This is like,
oh sure.
Like if I go back and I make Wildlife a good album, do we get Band on the Run? You can't mess with these things.
Just saying, if they decided, well, we want to keep the Beatles brand going into 1970 and kind of faked it almost. I mean, the album they put out in 1970, Let It Be, was obviously mostly recorded at the beginning of 69. So we know there's a famous meeting when they say John can have 3 songs, Paul can have 3 songs, George can have 3. If they'd wanted to make one more great Beatles album, it was there,
Oh, it's one of the most depressing what-ifs, really, especially since now we know, especially thanks to Mark Lewison, how close they were to actually doing that. Right, we're going to move on now to our main topic. I mean, we've been speaking for about 85 hours already, but we'll finally move on to the main topic of today.
And there's a couple more things we haven't done as well.
Is there anything you actually wanted to talk about, though? Because, I mean, again, I can just cut that out if you want.
Well, Imagine versus Ram. We could do it at the end, maybe. I don't know.
I'd rather save that for a potential episode, to be honest, if we come back to that.
All right. Well, the only thing then was just wanted to say that I love the Ballad of John Yoko. And even though it's John Yoko in the title, it has a unique place, and it's the only song that's just got John Lennon and Paul McCartney on it.
Yeah, the Nurk twins.
I just absolutely love it. Those harmonies at the end. And John's guitars are a tiny bit cheesy, perhaps, those guitars coming in from left and right, but all the rest of it is wonderful.
I love Paul's bass line on that. It's one of the classic Paul, can you come in and put something interesting behind my chords, please?
Yeah, they're just going back to the 50s, etc.
I wish that the B-side to that was One After 909. I really feel like it would have been a better package.
Yeah, that would have been good, wouldn't it? Yeah.
You definitely could have done like an EP around the Let It Be time of maybe their more 50s jam stuff. Like McCartney's Chopper Russian album. You could have done that around the same time. Again, keep the Beatle brand going. I mean, John would eventually go on to do rock and roll music as well. Paul did like Chopper and Kisses from the Bottom. So
Run Devil Run.
Yeah. We had the Long Tall Sally EP. It's not that out there that they might have done something like that. Would have been cool, actually.
Yeah, again, had John lived, rock and roll might have been the glue that got them together.
Definitely not the cover, though. My gosh.
All right. Yeah. Sorry, I stopped you going to Toot and a Snore, but go on. Because there's a rock and roll link there, isn't there?
So anyway, now we've gotten to know each other a little bit better, I think it's time that we got into the original conceit for this episode. And for those of people who've been listening, have probably read the title and thinking, when are they going to get around to it? Well, we're going to get around to it now, folks. We're going to talk about 1974's A Toot and a Snore. What is that? I think the elevator pitch is that it's the only existing recordings of John and Paul McCartney playing together after the breakup.
Yes. That's
all you mention if you want to sell it. If you're going to be an honest salesman, you'll say this is a happenstance recording of a drug-fueled jam session. You have Lennon, Paul, Linda, Harry Nilsson, Stevie Wonder, and then Bobby Keys and Jesse Ed Davis, who are both kind of in the John Lennon camp already, but they were like his recording band around this time, aren't they?
Yeah, more or less. I think Keltner was generally around at certain times as well, and apparently 25 other people at the rock and roll sessions. But yeah.
Yeah, so this was a jam recorded during or around the infamous Pussycat sessions.
I think it was on the first night, actually. I think that's
Really?
right. I think so.
I'm not terribly sure of who Harry Nilsson is. Possibly people in my audience might not be. What was Pussycats and who is Harry Nilsson to John Lennon?
Funnily enough, I've never actually heard Pussycats all the way through, but Harry Nilsson, I mean, he was a songwriter himself, although two of his most famous songs are Everybody's Talking, Everybody's Talking at Me, that one. But that was a cover, and then Without You, Can't Live If Living Is Without You. That was written by the Badfinger guys. But he had a great voice, but, he was a party animal, and him and John, I think they would have met late 60s, early 70s. I don't know when they started hanging out, but then there was Ringo, of course, was tight with Harry. But I think Harry Nilsson, he lost his voice, of course, famously around that time during those Pussycats sessions. I think they're probably pretty wild. I think the height of John's wildness seemed to be early 74, didn't it? But I think with Toot and Snore, I think the fact there's coke going round, again, that's probably some innocence on account of the public thinking, oh, wow, there was coke going around, a 1970s American rock session. Wow, what a revelation,
Yeah,
it's fairly commonplace, to be honest.
This is one thing that always annoys me. Paul's this squeaky clean image guy. Are you telling me he wasn't like Tony Montana in Scarface, surrounded by coke during the Wings Over America tour? Because they're the biggest rock band at the time. Even the smallest rock bands had the sugar powder on their nose. You've got Jimmy McCullough in the band. You've got Jojo Lane as a drug dealer. I think that's really been downplayed. We're not going to see in the upcoming 5-part documentary about Paul. Definitely not.
I read a book about, it wasn't about Paul, it was about the music scene, the rock scene. And I mean, they're just, not everyone's doing it. I'm sure there are people involved in rock who've never done any drugs or just very, very soft ones. But, it was just around all the time. There's so much evidence for that.
Well, I think more blame is in roadies and the enablers more than anything. These are the people, because, unless you're Paul McCartney trying to get into Japan, you don't carry your own drugs. So, Fleetwood Mac were going to thank their drug dealer on Rumours before he mysteriously died.
Right.
So Pussycats and John, this period, this is the infamous Lost Weekend. I hate to just say again, what's your take on this? But, I want to pick your brain. This is our first chat. Was the Lost Weekend really as non-PG and debaucherous as made out?
There were probably 10, 15, 20 nights like that. But over a year and a half, that may not be that much. I think it just all gets magnified because it's John Lennon. But I think he had the ability, one of his great abilities was to switch from one state to another quite easily. So I think he could go from doing nothing for a few days and then being very productive and suddenly getting sober. I think, you're going to talk to Ed Chen, aren't you? He told me about was this thing called the tilt mechanism that I think George had referenced, where the Beatles all had an ability where they'd gone too far to sort of say, right, I need to get my head together. So I think they were probably all constantly, Ringo's more drink, the other three various drugs at various times, that they were kind of constantly balancing one thing or another. So I think there's probably 4 to 5 months perhaps where they probably had a few good nights out or bad nights out, depending which way you look at it. But he always had the ability to produce, and I think there was always a sensible person underneath. So I think what saved him.
Yeah, it's just kind of weird that, the Beatles media can romanticize a period even when Lennon punches a woman in the face in public. It's weird that even that part of his life can be glossed over in that kind of rose-tinted way. Yeah,
I'm saying that the quantity of excessive behaviour possibly wasn't as much as people think. But definitely, if you want to go into that, if you believe May Pang's book, he tried to throttle her. I'm saying about this tilt mechanism, I think with John Lennon, the tilt mechanism was more with drugs. Okay, alcohol's a drug, I know, but if you take those, just for a second, take those two things as separate, I think drinking was something he couldn't control, and I think he could have easily killed someone. And he even said it in the most sanitized interview, the Andy Peebles one, 2 days before he died. He said, I could have killed someone then. So I think the quality, quote unquote, of the debauchery, as in the low quality of the behavior and the darkness of the behavior, was probably more than the quantity, let's say that.
Yeah, like all of the stories around John are around drink, especially like in like Hamburg and stuff like that. Like you never hear of John being a nuisance between Help and Rubber Soul. He's just got a joint and chilling out with Cynthia, you know?
Yeah, lots of munchies. That's why he got so fat. Lots of trips to the late night garage to get hobnobs and things like that, you know.
Yes. There's a great shot on the Band on the Run poster where you see a cardboard box that they've brought over to Lagos with them, and it's just full of Guinness and McVitie's biscuits and tinned beans. I'm like, priorities.
Yeah.
Just going back to May Pang, Yoko chose her for John in a weird way. What's all that about?
Unfortunately, this is the point from about 73 to 80. This is the point where I'm just on very shaky ground saying that I know anything. I have a fairly good handle on his life up to about then, but who knows?
It doesn't seem like he's going off the reservation at all. If he's with someone that's kind of pre-approved, almost like they are, just to quote Friends, on a break.
I think there's a decent argument to say that perhaps Yoko wanted, because she started having an affair with a guy called David Spinoza, I think played on both McCartney
and apparently Harry Nilsson, according to some books as well.
Oh, I never heard about that, but I guess anything went, so who knows. But I think the truth about that sort of split they had in 73 was no more than a married couple who lived in each other's pockets. Two artists probably just were sick of the sight of each other. And I think he needed someone to take care of him in the sense of getting things done, practical things. But obviously the fact that, I mean, he did like sort of Eastern women, let's say. I don't know if you can use the word Oriental now, but...
Might even beat that out.
Yeah. But I get the feeling that I think actually she did offer him a real girlfriend, like an adult relationship, rather than a kind of relationship of dependency. I think there's a good case for that. And I don't know what Yoko's up to. I mean, we hear about she was making all these phone calls. Elliot Mintz, I think, is a very, very dubious... He's basically paid by Yoko to give the official version and to give the version that makes her look the best. So I wouldn't take what he says with a great amount of credence. But I think she obviously knew May Pang was going to go with him, and she probably thought there was going to be some physical relationship because she was planning to do the same with David Spinoza, perhaps. But I don't think the emotional side, I don't think she was expecting that. Yeah. But what do I know?
I mean, it all goes back to that same comment that almost every single Beatles podcast ends with, we weren't there.
We weren't there. We don't actually know. This is my best guess. But at the end of the day, we're trying to entertain the listeners, aren't we, really? And they
trying.
Well, they seem to like our shows, so we must be doing something right.
So, A Toot and a Snore, recorded 28th of March 1974 at Burbank Studios, Los Angeles, California. It was never intended to be released, folks. You can hear someone at one point going, let's just start recording. However, in 1992, under whatever channels they operate in, a label called Mistral, which is an outfit out in Luxembourg, released it on both cassette and CD. It's only about 20, 30 minutes long. It's really not that extensive at all. And the list of contents is as follows. You've got A Toot and a Snore, which is basically John literally offering Stevie Wonder a line of coke off what I hope is a copy of Band on the Run or something in my own little head canon. Then you've got what's described as bluesy jam. Then it's studio talk. They tried to play a little song called Little Bitty Pretty One, but they can't actually remember any more of it, which is quite funny. Then you have a rundown of Lucille. And I thought, oh, wow, Paul's going to sing Lucille. No, John's going to sing Lucille. Paul is just on the drums for this.
Are you absolutely sure that's John singing?
I'm pretty sure it is. From what I've been able to find out, Paul is just on backing vocals, and you hear a bit on the third version of Stand By Me. That's all I heard of it.
Oh, yeah. I could definitely recognise him on that.
I know Paul's Lucille. I've listened to many early Wings gigs.
Right.
And it's that John's very like Lucille, whereas Paul gets that last note to be much larger. Lucille, like that. Get back where you belong. And they never do the first verse, any of the Beatles, because Lucille, the original version, doesn't start with get back where you belong. That's like the third verse or something. They always go straight to the good bit, which I always appreciated. Next, you've got Nightmares, which apparently, according to the notes here, is a version of a song called Sleepwalk by Santo and Johnny.
Yeah, it is. Do they start shouting out Nightmares or something? Because that is definitely Sleepwalk, yeah. That's a great song. Yeah.
Then we move on to 3 versions of Stand By Me. The first 2 is mostly just on going, I can't fucking hear it. It's just him shouting, and you can probably picture these poor studio technicians who are just there going, John, you're just coked out of your head. The levels are fine. So basically, we get 2 ruined versions of Stand By Me, and then we get a pretty complete third attempt right at the end with Paul sharing the vocals.
The John Lennon thing about getting angry, that sounds more like he's had a few drinks. I know there was coke going around, but I feel like that would be more of a drinking thing. But yeah, I wasn't there.
Drink and coke, not the best bedfellows, but they most commonly are.
I think the whole thing about this, I mean, when you said it was being released, do you actually mean an official release in another country or just on the market, black market?
This is something that I want to get into because I want to have a bootlegger on. I want to know the inside of this world. You know, how does it work? Where do the acetates come from? Where do the original recordings come from? How do they release it without being sued by Apple? I know Luxembourg is a country that has more companies than people, so that's probably how they're going to get around it. There's some like weird, obscure European tax dodging loophole laws. I'm guessing that's how it works. And then people physically just drive over borders with cassettes and CDs and pay off toll booths and stuff. I don't know how any of this actually gets into someone's hands in the UK or America. It seems like a really weird chain of events that seems very ineffective. And that's probably why you had to pay hundreds of pounds and dollars for these releases back then. I just want to say, I'm so thankful that I live in 2020 with the internet. I found this for free. My access to all of these bootlegs is unparalleled, really. I am able to absorb all of this culture that people had to live through over years, and I just get absorb it in a few minutes, and it's so exciting for me.
Yeah, I think the fact this was recorded, I mean, again, you have to think of it just as a bootleg. And I don't think it's that bad, actually. There's a great vocal on Lucille. It's just a fun run through. If they meant to do anything with it, they'd have spent probably 4 or 5 hours and got something together, you know.
Were you aware of this much before we started researching this episode? Was this like a notorious bootleg?
Oh, yeah. No, it's been around for a long time, yeah. I just listened back to it the other day.
I love the artwork on it as well. It's a great facsimile of... It's Revolver and the songs that John and Paul gave away, isn't it? It's like a mashup of those two.
Yeah, great pictures on there. It's Harry Nilsson on the front there, sipping a brandy Alexander, or whatever it was.
Yes.
Toot and a Snore. It's a great title.
You know that they wanted to call it a toot and a snort, and someone in the legal department, no, can't do that, even though we all know they're doing it.
But it kind of works because I think they found it quite boring, like to listen back to, because it's just a little run through. You know, it's just given extra significance because Paul was there, basically. I
think a lot of people's relationship with this bootleg is entirely based on how they were sold it originally. If you hear that, oh wow, there's a post-1970 recording of Lennon and McCartney, there's going to be a lot of hype surrounding that. And unfortunately, I don't think this album has lived up to the hype with anyone on this planet, unfortunately. You know, everyone goes, oh, well, you know, maybe they're going to do this or that. Maybe they'll do a Beatles song. No, they're not. You know, Paul's not even doing a real lead vocal. It's mostly a Stevie album for me. Just listening to Stevie, like, keep the session moving forward with his brilliant key playing. Apparently, Linda is on organ as well. And there's a really cute little moment where like Lennon's like, Mr. McCartney, I can't hear Stevie. Can you get your wife just to turn it down or something?
Oh, really?
Yeah. I guess a lot of people, their relation to this album, there is just the idea that there is some sort of McCartney-Lennon reunion. And this is one of those situations where I'm like, this doesn't prove anything, folks. This doesn't prove that their relationship improved. This doesn't prove that they were friends at the time. These are two men who are great with the media. These are two men who know how to play a room. Lennon himself says in a later quote, there were just basically 50 people looking at us and we were all stoned. I don't think having a few lines of coke and a whiskey proves that they've patched anything up at all. I think a lot of it is just people trying to find some sort of redemption at the end of the Beatles narrative. The redemption that maybe Anthology was trying to offer but never quite filled. And unless people can go to the grave being content with the knowledge that John and Paul repaired their friendship before 1980, it's almost manic, really. Have you ever seen Two of Us, the TV film?
I love that film, yeah. We had a clip of that. We did a show about John Lennon on film with Ed Chen, actually, looking at all the depictions. I love that. Do you like that film?
Jared Harris is so good in that movie.
I think they both are. I think that you really feel like they're mates. Like the Paul guy has basically an Irish accent, but it just doesn't bother me. You know, it's just, I love it.
I mean, since Liverpool is that kind of port with Ireland, you can somewhat justify it. You know, you can kind of do some mental gymnastics there.
Hi, I'm Lorne Michaels, the producer of Saturday Night. Right now we're being seen by approximately 22 million viewers. But please allow me, if I may, to address myself to 4 very special people. John, Paul, George, and Ringo, the Beatles.
Hey, wake up.
Lately there have been a lot of rumors to the effect that the 4 of you might be getting back together. That would be great.
Not a
In my book,
chance.
the Beatles are the best thing that ever happened to music. It goes even deeper than that. You're not just a musical group, you're a part of us. We grew up with you.
He's off with
For this reason that I'm inviting you to come on our show. Now, we've heard and read a lot about personality and legal conflicts that might prevent you guys from reuniting. That's something which is none of my business.
Personality
You
conflict.
guys will have to handle that. But it's also been said that no one has yet to come up with enough money to satisfy you.
Yeah.
Well, if it's money you want, there's no problem here. The National Broadcasting Company has authorized me to offer you a certified check for $3,000. Here it is. Can we get a close-up of this, Dave? Which camera's on? Move in there. Now, here it is, as you can see, verifiably, it is a check made out to you, the Beatles, for $3,000. All you have to do is sing 3 Beatle tunes. She loves you, yeah, 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 that's $1,000 right there.
What if we don't want to sing?
You know the words? It'll be easy. Like I said, this check here is made out to the Beatles. You can find it any way you want. If you want to give Ringo less, that's up to you. I'd rather not get involved. I'm sincere about this. If it helps you to reach a decision to reunite, well then, it's worth the investment.
It's
worth the investment. You know where I can be reached? Just think about it, okay? Thank you.
Let's do it. What? It'll blow everybody's minds.
It certainly would.
Well, come on then. What are we waiting for?
Wait, this is live?
Yeah, live from New York. It's Saturday night. You know, it's just down the block. We could make it easily.
Are you mad?
Yeah. Come on. Do you bring your guitar?
Yeah.
We'll go get it. We'll work through a few numbers, you know. Come on.
It's in the car.
Call down and have them bring it up. We'll go through a few tunes, go down to the studio. I'll go get mine out of the bedroom,
I don't know.
right?
You know?
Why?
Well, we haven't played together in ages.
What's that got to do with it? Come on, it's like screwing, you know, once you know how to do it. Come on. Look, you do your Jerry Lee Lewis number, and we'll do the Everly Brothers one as well, all right? What?
What if we're crap?
Are you serious?
I am.
This is only what the whole world's been waiting for. Come on. It'll be fun.
You really want to do this?
Yeah.
All right. Will we get there before the show's over?
You know, we'll take it one step at a time, all right? All right.
Right.
I guess I'm a bit like one of these dark, pointless, gritty reboots that we see in cinema so much. Like, I've kind of got a dour pessimism when it comes to the Beatles. I'm not going to believe that the Let It Be sessions were this wonderful Field of Roses experience that Peter Jackson's going to give to us in a few months.
That's been put back, hasn't it, to next year?
Yeah, that's really annoyed me, I'm not going to lie. Especially since Peter Jackson pretty much made the 3 best movies of all time. I'm a massive Lord of the Rings fan. And it is so fitting that he would then do a Beatles film, seeing as how the Beatles were going to do a version of Lord of the Rings, possibly with Stanley Kubrick at one point. Nice little bit of symmetry there. Also, though, something that no one's really mentioned, if you watch the bonus features for The Two Towers, I believe, Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, the second film, they recorded all of the music with Howard Shore, the composer, at Abbey Road Studios. And there's footage of Jackson in Abbey Road talking to people. And it's like, that's probably where it started. That visit right there, that's probably where the first balls started rolling.
What year did Two Towers come out?
2002, because they were going to change the title in America. Going back just to my point that this wasn't really the coming together of minds that we'd like to think it was. I've got a quote here from Paul in an interview for Rolling Stone in '86, and this is him talking about him trying to get back with John in '76, a couple of years after this recording. And he says, "I happened to be on my way to the Caribbean, so passing through New York, I rang John up. But there was so much suspicion, even though I came bearing the olive branch. I said, hey, I'd like to see you. He said, what for? What do you really want? It was difficult. Finally, he had this great line for me. He said, you're all pizza and fairy tales.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one. Yeah, that's a good
He's sort of become Americanised by then. So the best insult I could thought was say, oh, fuck off, Kojak, and slam the phone down.
Really? Is that direct quote?
So, again, the Yoko haters are just going to be like, no, he's under the thumb. She said you're not allowed to go out and play with your friend. That's up in the air. I can't really comment on that.
I think had he stayed with May Pang in The Lost Weekend, I think him and Paul 100% would have done something together.
Yeah.
That's one thing I'm fairly sure about.
These aren't the right drugs, though, to be establishing a new friendship, though. Class A substances. If this was a toot and a joint, I reckon, we probably would have had better music as well, actually.
Or a joint and a snore, perhaps.
A joint and a snore.
That wouldn't have worked. They just got high and then fallen asleep.
Yeah, they would have just balanced each other out and probably had a very level-headed conversation.
Yeah, perhaps you got to get the balance right. Yeah.
Maybe a toot and a tablet, maybe, and they do a bit of ecstasy and they start saying, "Oh, I love you, bro. We should totally start a business tomorrow." That kind of vibe. I mean, if they'd had something really, happy-go-lucky, like Dr. Feelgood kind of stuff, they might have even said stuff that they wouldn't have really been able to record. Like, it's actually quite shocking that there's nothing too damning on this.
Yeah.
The most damning thing we hear is John offer Stevie a line. We don't hear him go and then start singing as or do I do or anything like that,
Yeah, I think with John and Paul, I think that there was so much water under the bridge that they'd had that 10 years basically of living in each other's pockets, as he had 5 years. There's a pattern there, of course.
Well, the other people are living this breakup through them, possibly more than they are. Like, I think we all know John and Paul were thinking about each other a lot more than they would ever let on. But just like the idea that, oh, you and Paul are meeting together. I thought you weren't talking, and then bam, it's going to come back to them, isn't it? Whereas they may have forgotten it themselves.
Perhaps in a funny way, the close friendship had already run its course. They'd done all the deep stuff already. They'd been through the 60s together.
What about the night we cried? Yeah.
I believe that happened in 64. They had a night when they got drunk and talked about their mothers and stuff. I don't know. I think, sometimes childhood friends, essentially, I mean, they didn't go to the same school, but they were school friends or teenage friends originally. I don't think there has to be a heavy reason that they didn't grow together, that they grew apart quite a bit.
Well, this is interesting, right? This is bringing up anxiety in me now. Me thinking, oh my God, what if my three closest best friends, we're like Paul and John Lennon, then the idea that this might just fizzle out in a year or two. And perhaps it's that kind of latent anxieties in other people as well. Maybe they don't want to think that their great friendships could just go up in smoke like that, and then they never talk to each other again, and then one of them dies, and then it's never reconciled. That's something that people could be thinking about themselves. Well,
I liken it a bit to backpacking, actually. If you've ever been backpacking, you spend 24 hours a day or all your waking hours with people that you haven't met, and there's loads to know, and then after about 4 or 5 days, you've exhausted it. So perhaps they kind of exhausted their relationship. I think they would have got back together, but I think like when Paul makes an album, sometimes people say, well, they used to, not so much anymore, but they used to say, oh, why isn't Ringo the drummer on this? He's like, well, why does he have to be? Like, why does he have to be the drummer? Like, if they didn't work with George Martin in the 70s. Oh, John, why isn't George Martin the producer of your album? Well, why should he be? Again, the public, whoever they are, a certain public just seem to think that they need to be manacled together forever, but obviously not so much anymore, but I'm thinking more 70s and 80s perhaps. A duty.
It does line up with their idea of they're in the army almost, and that they're in this eternal war, and that they are brothers in arms and that kind of thing.
Yeah, army buddies, yeah, you're right.
I guess though, when you're in the Beatles, you don't ever have the situation where like Jimmy Nichols dying in your arms going, where's my mama? You don't ever get that kind of traumatic thing that might make you unconditionally brotherly almost. They've just got an incredibly close friendship.
No, you're right. It's not like actually seeing someone die in front of you, but I think they had been through a kind of a war, or they'd certainly been through a massive trauma.
I'm not going to compare McCartney nailing a condom to a wall and lighting it on fire to the bombing of Dresden.
No, but I think they all had... There's a case for saying that all four of them had some kind of nervous breakdown in 1970. So I think they'd had a heavy experience. Not as heavy as being in a war, absolutely. Totally agree. And one interesting, actually, from Toot and Snore, how about this? Paul's actually playing Ringo's drum kit, isn't he?
Apparently Ringo comes in the next day and he says, well, McCartney's always messing up my drum kit.
Yeah.
Like, that's so funny. The fact that, I'm not sure if you've ever been to a school reunion. I mean, I'm only 27 and I've already been to one. And everyone reverts to exactly who they were when they left school. I mean, listeners out there, this might be quite shocking, but I wasn't exactly the coolest kid at school. And I have a little bit of a stutter now, but imagine me at 16 trying to talk to pretty girls. It was a mess. It really was. And the moment I went back there, I suddenly turned into stuttering quiet little Sam again. And you hear that in a lot of George's stories, especially like hanging out with Paul and stuff. They just go back to that big brother, little brother relationship or the competitiveness. And it's hard to shake loose those chains.
Yeah, I suppose in the case of Ringo, that Ringo drum thing, that perhaps was a bit more charming because it's kind of, he's remembering Paul as he was, but almost as if, the last 5 years hadn't happened. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, reverting to type. And it's rough for George because in the anthology, when I revisited it a little bit, because it's 25 years this year, isn't it? Kind of just feels a bit fake and that George isn't quite there. I mean, he was there because he'd had financial issues. We know that. But yeah, it's rough on him because, when they made the anthology, let's say Paul's 53 and George is 52. There's 9 months between them, but they're both in their 50s. So what's the difference?
He'll always be 18 months older than me. Yeah. It's the great.
And he wasn't even 18 because he's only 9. Yeah, it wasn't even that much.
Asking for accuracy from those 4 men, though, is just not going to happen. I remember when Paul played Too Many People from Ram. Like, this is for the Wings fans. And I was like, oh, you Wally. That's not a Wings song. My God, get off the stage. 0 points, Paul. Try again next time. Don't ever get anything wrong about Ram in front of me. It's not going to go well. Every John Lennon fan's like, yep, Plastic Ono Band, best post-Beatle album. Every George fan, yep, All Things Must Pass, best post-Beatle album. The McCartney fans, it's either Band on the Run, but I kind of see that as like, when you get Baby's first carpentry kit or like cookery set and it's just got all the big buttons for kids and stuff. I kind of feel like Band on the Run's Baby's first favourite Paul McCartney album. It's not difficult to like it, whereas like Ram, you've got real substance there,
Yeah, that's definitely, as perhaps we were saying earlier, Imagine versus Ram is like the crux of the debate in a way, because it came out the same year, and Plastic Ono Band is so different from anything that probably anyone would have done. I think it'd be interesting to compare, as you're going to do Plastic Ono Band and McCartney. That's very interesting. I think Imagine and Ram a bit more on the same page, perhaps. If you went track by track, which I've never actually done. Be interesting to see how many of the John songs you'd prefer to the Paul.
A lot of McCartney one is unfinished and instrumentals and stuff like that, but that's part of its charm.
Yeah, I think maybe a good comparison would be that there's a bootleg called Between the Lines, which was all John's kind of noodlings from 75 to 80, some more fleshed out than others. Now, if you took the best 8 or 9, the most fleshed out there, you could compare that with McCartney. That would be pretty good.
So he did Double Fantasy just before his death, and then there's another album called Milk and Honey, and I've heard you can combine them to get an entirely John Lennon album.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what I did, and when I had Kit O'Toole on the show, we kind of worked from that. Milk and Honey, although it's got songs like Grow Old With Me, which is quite sentimental, but it's well thought of, that song. It's got some edgy stuff, and it's got Nobody Told Me, which I think is the best of the whole sessions. And it's got stuff like I Don't Want to Face It, and it's got this famous line, you say you want to save humanity, but it's people that you just can't stand.
Wow, and, that's such a Lennon line.
It is, yeah, and I think that would really, if that had come out in 1980, there might have been a few people who might have said, that doesn't quite fit with the rest of all this sort of family contentment stuff. Although I'm Losing You is quite edgy, but I think if you had a John Lennon 1980 album, which I would have liked to have seen, and Yoko could have put out her album at the same time in conjunction rather than this heart play thing, I think that's a pretty decent album. You still had it for sure.
How many suits must have been on their knees? John, please, just do it as a solo record. I'm begging you.
Yeah, I would have liked to see them do that as a fan, because then Yoko still would have got her album, But again, I suppose they're competing. Tell you what, though, Walking on Thin Ice is a great song. Oh, yeah, it's a good dance number.
Come on, if we're going to compare McCartney and Lennon, though, Paul got his wife to join the band, didn't put her up front and centre, and yet somehow she still gets as much hate as Yoko does in some circles.
I quite like her harmonies. I don't know much about her keyboard playing, but that Wings harmony sound I quite like. Yeah, distinctive.
Yeah, part of that is its imperfection. I feel it's the fact that it isn't perfect. Also, the dirty secret is that most of Linda's keyboards parts are like pre-programmed live.
Oh, I see,
the keys probably don't even work. It's just her just plinky plonking, and going whoa, and that's what you need.
Well, I think that Paul had a really good band. I think he's actually the best band he's ever had. The Robbie McIntosh, Hamish.
You prefer the '89 lineup? Okay.
As musicians, I think the current one they do a perfectly good job. Nothing wrong at all. But I think Robbie McIntosh was a really amazing guitarist. He was with the Pretenders, and they had who's the keyboard guy who's still there now?
Wixie, yeah.
Yeah, Wix. I think you didn't really need perhaps Linda's keyboards when you got that guy there, plus Paul playing the piano. So I see her more as a vocalist, and I think, I like her backing vocals. Pretty cool.
The one I would have loved to have seen them actually give it a shot, for the High, High, High Sea Moon album cover, Linda's got the bass. I'm like, oh my God. If we could crowdfund a time machine just to go back in time and pay her to do a bass solo live, I'd definitely pay. Take it away, Linda. Proper like experimental prog rock solo. I'd love that.
So interesting that they both, John and Paul, both married American women who actually went to the same college. Yeah, Sarah Lawrence.
That's the conspiracy, Anthony. That's the conspiracy. We're going to pretend to not like each other, and we're both going to bag Beatles.
But they both kind of did the same thing. I mean, they got married a week apart. Their lives paralleled each other in a funny way.
Eric and George were definitely sharing wives and girlfriends.
Yeah.
Would I get sued if I implied that John and Yoko and Paul and Linda could have swapped? I think if we found that out and there was like a national tragedy on the same day, you wouldn't even find out about the tragedy. It would just be John and Paul wife swappers, or John and Paul swingers. The Sun would love that. Oh my God.
Yeah, I think it's just reached a point now where, like I say, hate to say the same thing again, but I have to just concede that I don't know anything, I can speculate up to a good point, though.
But I honestly find the more liberal times we live in now to be working at the advantage of finding out the real truth of the Beatles story, because now we're in a point whereby it doesn't matter if John was gay or not. It's not important at all. And now that we are in a more accepting time, I think we will start to see the story from both sides. Like, it sounds incredibly morbid, but we're not going to get the good movie about the Beatles until sadly Ringo and Paul are no longer here with us, possibly even Olivia and Yoko.
But then you'll have Danny and Sean. You wouldn't be able to wait till they've all died. That's the problem, because there'll be more generations.
Look, I am going to get Netflix. Once The Crown is over, Netflix is going to need a British posh flagship show. 10 seasons, 10 years, you find some 18-year-old lads who are good actors, and you do a year per series. It would be the biggest thing ever.
No, it would be good.
But I want the toilet around John's neck. I want George to punch John over biscuits in the Let It Be sessions. I want to see... I want the most, what they would call a hatchet job, but to me, that's the more interesting side of it. Like a Martin Scorsese epic of the Beatles, Goodfellas style. Ever since I can remember, I wanted to be a rock and roller, something like that.
I think stories will continue to come out, and I think personally that the John Lennon story will go more towards the Albert Goldman than the Coleman. I think it'll go further away from the Coleman the more comes out. As for whether people will agree, I don't think so.
No, I can remember at secondary school, me and my mate were like, we have to do a movie called A Weekend with John. And I was like, oh no, they've already done that movie now. Damn it.
Well, the thing they did with Dylan, the I'm Not There film, that was a great idea.
Oh my God. I've never been more sexually attracted to Bob Dylan than when Cate Blanchett played him.
Well, she looked marvellously androgynous, actually, I must say.
I know. I mean, that is another digression for another day. But Cate Blanchett, if you're listening to this obscure British Paul McCartney podcast, give me a call.
But I think the future might be not trying to look like them, but trying to do what she did. I mean, she looked vaguely like him, but trying to get some kind of feeling and trying to get some sort of aspect, as he did with Bob Dylan. I think John Lennon would be very much a good candidate for that. I think the Beatles as a whole, I think it's been done reasonably well. But I think to explore these sides of John Lennon's personality, as I've done in my podcast, but it's taken me already 40 whatever episodes, probably 50 by the time this comes out, actually. I think there's scope for that. because I think he's interesting enough. I'm sure Paul is as well. I just don't know as much about him as you do, and Tom and other people.
Dude, when you sprung on me, who is Paul McCartney? I kind of had to ask myself quite honestly, who the fuck is he? Like, I know what a Paul McCartney is. I know what he does and what he's made and what he styles. Who he is, though, that is completely up in the air. Like, you always hear, like, he says things like, you know, if you sign these NDAs, you can come to dinner with me and I'll tell you the lot. I'm like, oh my God, I'd sign my soul away. I'd literally say, Paul, MPL has my eternally damned soul. You can do whatever you want with it. Just tell me what happened in that Japanese prison.
I think what we all like, I think we can all say this, is we like it when just like little grains of truth that we haven't heard before come out.
It's the Star Wars syndrome. Nothing is worse than knowing where Darth Vader came from. Or like the Alien prequels. Don't tell me how the alien was made. Just show me the Beatles, you know. Yeah. I want to know all of this stuff, but forbidden fruit, the apple, once you've gained the knowledge, you can't go back, and it might not be what you wanted.
Yeah. I guess the debate goes on. I think with John Lennon, it's because I'm dealing with a limited amount. I do feel like the topics of the podcast will eventually run out, but it's still going, you know.
Thankfully with me, Paul's just got so many projects and side things.
Yeah. You're never going to be stuck for material.
Fucking hell, would Lennon have done a children's book?
Well, quite possibly. Some illustrations or something. Something Alice in Wonderland-esque.
Nah, it'd be about peace, I reckon.
Yeah, as well.
Yeah. It's a bed-in time story. Hey, there you are.
Yeah. Stay in bed, read this book, you know, that kind of thing.
Anyway, it's been several hours by this point, and you know what? Behind the scenes, 2 separate days worth of recording as well. The million-dollar question here. Is a Toot and a Snore an essential listen for a Beatles fan?
It's just a sort of curiosity, listen to it once for posterity, basically. I can't really talk about it as a release, because I'm sure it wasn't sanctioned. Yeah, it's just a curiosity, like many kind of studio run-throughs that happen to be recorded, really. It's just an accident of time that it happened to be the last time they were together, I don't know. There was a track called Too Many Cooks, which apparently had Mick Jagger on vocals, and John produced that, and I don't know when that was produced, but I think it was 1974. And if the listeners want to, and you haven't have a listen to that, I should listen back to it as well. That's what it might have sounded like if they'd made more effort. If they hadn't just been having a studio run through. Perhaps the weight of their past was just a bit too much. That'd be my conclusion, I think. What kept them apart was that. Perhaps Yoko as well, I don't know. But if I could end with just a little bit of speculation, I think they would have, John would have got on board with the anthology. They might have done a few things, but I think the weight of their past would have been too much, I think. And like I said, I think the thing that came up earlier when we were talking was that maybe too much water had gone under the bridge and they'd been through such an intense relationship. I think that's what happened with John and Yoko, to be perfectly honest. When they split in 1973, they had 5 years in each other's pockets, and perhaps they just exhausted it. And that it became, perhaps like a lot of long-term marriages, sort of a marriage of convenience with some affection.
It's interesting because going back to the episode I did with Tom Hunyadi a while ago for like the hypothetical Beatles reunion, we talked about how John and Paul would have their unique relationships with the Beatles at this point. And, you know, you've got Paul in the mid-80s doing like P.S. Love Me Do, and he's re-recording Let It Be, and My Brave Face is very Beatle-esque, and he's reconnecting with his Beatle legacy that way. George does, you know, When We Was Fab and stuff like that. Ringo's he's always managed to delve back into that pot, as it were, with a little less or more grace, should we say, than the others. He's always been doing Beatle tunes. With John, when I did my set list and Tom did his, Tom was very much like John would only play the rock and roll black and white Beatles stuff, and I was on the complete opposite end, that he'd only really want to do the cool kind of Revolver onwards, possibly even White Album onwards exclusively. What do you think John would have been more drawn to if he'd have come back to a Beatle reunion?
Beatle reunion. Can envisage an acoustic section, which would be quite good. That perhaps, I don't know, Paul might do Blackbird or something, and maybe they'd find a way of John and George to play something along with him, so it would sound a bit more like I've Just Seen a Face or something like that. I think there's certain songs he would have liked to have done, like Help. Probably would have worked up Strawberry Fields, maybe had Wicks or whoever to do the Mellotron, but I think the rock and roll would be the thing that perhaps, if he didn't want to take it too seriously and if he didn't want to go too deep into collaboration with the others, then the rock thing would be a kind of way of making it not dumbed down but less serious perhaps. And rock and roll was the glue. So, but I think they would have quite liked to have played some of the White Album songs. I mean, I'd love to have heard Your Blues live, because he did it live with Plastic Ono. So
yes. And that was the Eric Clapton version of the Plastic Ono Band as well. So that song just sounds incredible live as well.
Yeah, it was a rock and roll circus, wasn't it? The Rolling Stones. Yeah, it's a great performance. Mitch Mitchell on drums. And then they did it in Toronto with Eric and Klaus Voormann and Alan White. Yeah.
I think we've pretty much come to the end of my notes, at least. Thank you for doing this, dude. This has been really fun. The moment I heard you on Those Conspiracy Guys, I made a little note on my phone, contact Glass Onion Guy, and you pretty much got back in touch with me straight away with what you described as a kind of like Lennon-esque kind of manic enthusiasm, which I was really happy with. And I'm really glad that we've done this.
Excellent.
Like I said at the very start of the show, a Lennon needs a McCartney. I didn't find out till we started recording that you'd already done stuff with Two Legs, which kind of broke my heart a little.
Oh,
but,
well, it's not out yet, though.
Yeah, well, I'm speaking to Tom later today, so I will chastise him.
I'll say hi as well.
I shall. Anyway, folks, this has been my first Swapcast. You're like third or fourth, something like that.
Still not sure what it means, but...
Still not sure who coined the term, but someone did, and it definitely caught on. We're definitely going to have to do this again. I'm sorry, folks, that this isn't the kind of normally conclusive ending that they might be used to on my show when I'm on my own. It's very pre-written.
We'll find a way of mashing it up so the listeners get both of our...
Are you saying we can work it out?
We can, yes.
Life is very short, and that is why we're going to end the episode as soon as possible, folks. Thank you so much for listening to Paul or Nothing. Thank you for listening to Glass Onion on John Lennon. This has been really fun, Anthony. I can't wait to have you back on again soon.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, I'll bring my A game.
And you can sing another song for me as well. I'll be looking forward to that.
Yeah, I'll spontaneously bust out the guitar. Yeah. All right, thanks a lot. It's been loads of fun.
Take care, folks.
Bye-bye.
So there you have it, friends. Episode 52, in the bag, in the can, one of those, both of those. Thanks once again to Sam for having me on his show originally and for a very enjoyable talk. So as promised, just to tell you what's coming up on this podcast in the future, I've actually recorded, as of now, 28th of September, I think I've got enough material up to the end of the year. Ridiculous amounts. I've got the Elvis talk that I talked about 1 or 2 episodes ago. I've got the talk, the Coleman and Goldman one, which I did back in May. That will be going out pretty soon. Before that, though, I am putting out a couple of quote-unquote birthday shows. Well, one of them is a 2-parter. So, in fact, it's 3 shows, 3 episodes in all. And the first one, which will be the next show, I'm going to unleash some of the listeners onto the rest of you listeners. I had the idea a month or 2 back that for John Lennon's posthumous 80th birthday, I wanted to do something different. So I chose my 3 most loyal listeners who give me regular feedback and give me lots of messages of support in general. I gave them the opportunity to come on and just talk about John Lennon, to talk about the Glass Onion podcast and, Beatles in general. So it was really fun. I've already recorded those. So you will meet those 3 lucky people next week. I'll try and get the show out by the 9th. Pretty confident I can do that. October the 9th, John Lennon's birthday is next Friday. Should be out before then. So yeah, that'll be that one. The other birthday show is ranking the John Lennon albums. Not going to tell you any more of that because I want some element of surprise. But I got together a couple of people who've been on the show whose first names begin with K. I'll let you work it all out from there. Is that one? I also talked to Al Sussman, and I've just been given a PDF by Ken Womack of his book John Lennon 1980. So I will be devouring that very soon and then interviewing Ken. We've already fixed that one up. So definitely after that one I'll have enough for the end of the year. And I'll probably be going into January, but I don't really want to leave anything hanging at the end of the year. So I'll get them all out this year. So basically a bumper crop. There could be 10 or more episodes coming out after this before the end of 2020. So all good. Just before I go, just to say, as usual, please subscribe, please rate and review on iTunes or Stitcher. YouTube channel's gradually building up, so please press subscribe there. And I'm just going to leave you after the outro music with a little bit more of the Toot and Snore bootleg. So, just remains for me to say thank you very much for listening. Hope you enjoyed today's show, and I'll be back very soon. So until then, take care, all the best, and goodbye.
stand